Okay, everybody, welcome. Welcome. Hello. 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 Welcome to the City of Cross Lake special meeting about the land use amendment, chapter 26, and the moratorium. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul. Let's see, it's September 30th at 5:30.
We're still trying to set up the equipment so that Marcia can join us.
Oh, so you want to wait?
She's on Zoom? Do you have it on? Where is it? We have to be able to see her in order for her to vote.
Stay tuned, folks. Little technical delay.
I guess our announcement was premature. Okay.
D.
Here's Marcia.
Okay, we got Marcia on board. We'll resume. Folks, come on. Let's have a meeting. Thank you. Go ahead, Paul.
When she's voting, the audience has to be able to see her
Oh,
and
when
hear
we're
her.
voting, okay.
Right.
I can bring her back up. All right. Well, good evening, City Council and Mayor. Appreciate you guys taking the time to be here tonight on a special occasion. First, I know it's been a lot of lead up until this point, a lot of anticipation. First, I just wanted to thank city staff, you guys, but then also, and mostly my planning commission. They've put in countless hours into this, along with Cheryl, but we've met just about every 2 to 3 weeks on workshops during the middle of the day to come up with these decisions that we're presenting to you tonight. So just wanted to give a shout out to them. I know a number of them are in the audience tonight, so wanted to do that. So we've put in a ton of time. The Planning Commission and city staff came together and studied the land use ordinance regulating the development and accessory structures to ultimately determine if amendments to the land use ordinance are necessary to facilitate orderly development in the city. The moratorium that we've been tasked to work through was placed into effect on May 13th, 2024. And so before we get into some of the specific changes that are in front of you tonight, I wanted to give just a little bit of a backstory as to why we're here tonight, what kind of led up to this point, just to give you and then audience members a little bit of context again and some reminders. So first, just for a number of years, the aesthetics of our corridors, our entrances, along with the kind of development that has been taking place in our community has been in question and of some concern. The question has also been raised, are we maintaining the character of our city? And are we doing enough to preserve and conserve some of the environmental ideologies of what we want our community to be moving forward and the sustainable growth moving forward. So then back in March, it was brought to the city's attention through our city attorney that many of the structures that we were permitting were in contradiction to what our land use ordinance actually stated.
Can you be specific about that, Paul?
Yes, and I will show you. So here's the moratorium that got put on May 12th, and a lot of the ordinance or the moratorium was structured around these couple of items. So in our community, we were permitting accessory structures as a principal structure, both in the residential districts and the commercial districts. So an accessory structure, as it's stated on there, is, let's see if I can, is this not, there we go. A use or structure which is incidental and subordinate to and on the same lot as the principal use or structure and does not include living quarters. Such structures include sheds, storage shelters, pole buildings, detached garages, in-ground pools, and similar structures. Also, accessory use. A use incidental and subordinate to the main use of the premises. An accessory use cannot exist without the establishment of a primary use. And so for, years, we were allowing people to, build pole sheds, detached garages, sheds, without a principal structure. So Sandy, if you came, in and you had a piece of land out in the, out in the RR5, nothing else on it, you were allowed to build a garage or a pole shed. And that is contradictory to what, our land ordinance states. But that's also to be said about the commercial district as well.
This terminology was always in the ordinance.
What you see, it was in our ordinance, correct?
It was
Yeah.
in our ordinance.
Yes.
Because there's been some, discussion that it's just a matter of interpretation, but that seems pretty clear.
The accessory structure and the accessory use, both of those were actually, I look back when our ordinance was first put into place in 1972, both of those are in there.
Okay.
Those have always been in there. And then item number 2 is, which coincides with it, but storage building and commercial use, because in the commercial district and industrial commercial districts in our community, we were permitting accessory structures as a principal use. And so, again, that goes kind of against our ordinance as far as allowing personal storage or personal use in a commercial area. So here it states, a structure used for the storage of belongings, equipment, or materials that is not intended for human habitation and available on a rental or lease basis. And a commercial use, the principal use of land or buildings for the sale, lease, rental, trade of products, goods, or services. So that's ultimately where the moratorium came into play. The city felt like we were sitting on a lot of permitted buildings out in our community that maybe should not have been permitted. And so between that and some of just the concern for the aesthetics of our corridors and entrances, City Council decided to put a moratorium on back in March.
So Paul, can I ask you a question, just as a reference question? Toy box storage, you're familiar with toy box storage, right?
Yes.
That was originally built and the spaces rented out. And I believe since then, they have all been sold now individually. So they're individual units for personal storage. So is that against our ordinance?
So right now, yes, it would be. So you can, so as we are permitting today and as what we feel like our ordinance states is that it has to be for rent or for lease. Both in our storage building, commercial and commercial use, it states that it's got to be rented or leased because that keeps it a business and not personal use.
So is one of our options tonight to take a look at our ordinances, and one of the options may be to change the ordinance to allow that use instead of go back and...
And I will get to that eventually, but
Okay.
yes, that is part of it, is looking at what we are proposing to prohibit and what we are looking to allow and where. So once the Planning Commission got together, started our workshops, we went down a couple of different paths, we went down a lot of different rabbit holes, but a couple of different paths. One is the residential districts and then the commercial districts as far as accessory structures. As far as residential, we thought that was pretty straightforward as far as accessory structures go. We wanted to keep what our ordinance states as far as if you want to come in for a garage, pole shed, any type of accessory structure, you need to establish a principal structure on your parcel first. So really no changes are to be made. That is just what moving forward we are administrating. And then two, obviously, we went down the road of the commercial district and the commercial, industrial district and limited commercial district. So a couple of things that we wanted to first see is, what our comprehensive plan says about our business districts. In the limited commercial district, the purpose of this district is to establish and provide a commercial environment with a limited mixture of commercial and office-related development and services. Commercial district may be located within in or outside the shoreline zone. And then a commercial light industrial district. The purpose of this district is to establish and maintain a district for light industrial purposes with commercial activities that can provide the employment opportunities for the residents of the community, allow for the production and the manufacture of goods and products, provide for the retail display and sale of the goods and products manufactured on the site, other related products or services, and provide professional contractor services and related office uses. And again, I'm not going to go read through all of these, but I didn't realize this isn't going with me. Sorry, this is my first time on tech support.
You okay? What? Just wondered if you were okay.
I don't know why that's not jumping down with me. There, guys.
So folks, I'm going to talk a little bit here while Paul's digging through there. Tonight, the purpose of this thing is public forum, public comment. So when Paul gets done here, we're going to open it up to the public. You guys are going to have a chance to speak. We're not going to speak back to you. We're going to listen to what you got to say. And then after you're done, then we're going to have a discussion. So just a little heads up.
There we go. Except no, I can't read mine, but that's okay. So here's the last page I just read off of. This is what our comprehensive plan states, which is our policies here in the city of Cross Lake, along with some of our economic vitality goals, which are to capitalize on Cross Lake's unique economic drivers in order to promote the community, spur economic growth, and serve residents, seasonal residents, businesses, and visitors. Encourage economic growth while maintaining Cross Lake's character through preservation and conservation of the environment, and consider financial impacts of decisions regarding community growth and development. So, as a planning commission, as city staff, we wanted to always start with our comprehensive plan. What are our policies moving forward? How do we want to make these decisions for the community? What's going to be best looking forward? So we started there, and from that, we one of our goals was to protect our main corridors and entryways and the aesthetics of those. How do we make our city an appealing place to drive through? And we felt like some of the development that has been going on and has been of concern for many years does not coincide with what our comprehensive plan states. And so what we created was a corridor overlay district, and that is a district that overlays on top of our main corridors. And we established we decided that those main corridors are obviously County Road 33, or County Road 3, County Road 66, County Road 16, County Road 36, and County Road 37 as our main corridors. So along those main corridors, we decided to do a corridor overlay district that has a little bit more restrictions and prohibits some uses that I'll get into. But going back, just to take a look at another thing that, as a planning commission, city staff looked at is how our city's made up. We're 40 square miles. 1/3 of our community is made up of water. 1/3 of our community is made up of state and or county land, which makes about 1/3, a little bit more, of private land, whether that's RR5, Shoreland District, limited commercial, downtown district, and industrial. And so we don't have a ton of land for private development left in this community. And so, again, going back, we established a corridor overlay district. That was one of the big things, because that allowed us to focus on those main entrances, main corridors, and how do we establish certain standards within that, so that way it's appealing when people come in. And so we decided that 400 feet from the right-of-way on each side of the road would make up our corridor. I know we flagged off every 50 yards one day and decided and looked at our limited commercial as a whole and our industrial areas, and came up with 400. So 400 from the right-of-way, and the road right-of-way, typically 66 feet. So if you can imagine a 866-foot corridor going down those county roads that we discussed.
Paul, is that 400 feet from the center of the road or from the?
From the road right-of-way, and the road right-of-way, there's 66 feet, so
Okay.
typically 433 feet from the center.
Okay.
So that kind of brings us to some of the changes that we wanted to make within the corridor and in our land use table moving forward. But before we get into, I guess, more the nitty-gritty, I had mentioned that in the residential district, that was the one path that we went down. We're going to keep the ordinance as it states. Accessory structures, you need to establish a principal structure. Accessory structure needs to be subordinate to a principal use. In the commercial district, we're saying the same thing. You need to establish a principal structure in order to have an accessory structure, and that there is no personal storage in the limited commercial district or the industrial, because that is not a prohibited use or a desired use in the
And that's
city.
outside of the 400 feet.
That is.
It's in the whole district.
As a district. No personal storage in those districts. We're not allowing accessory structures without a principal structure to be established. And in the commercial district, a principal structure is a business. In the rural residential or shoreline district, it is a house.
You have conditional use under, limited commercial, downtown commercial, for accessory structures. So you're still going to allow some
So
conditional
you can
use?
still, if you have a principal use that you establish as a business, you can still build an accessory structure. You're still allowed to store, use it for storage or, whatever else, as long as you establish that principal structure first.
The downtown district.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that would be for, limited commercial, industrial, residential, as long as you can establish a principal use.
But you still have to apply for a conditional use?
Correct.
Permit, okay.
And I'll get into that. But then, going into the land use table and some of the changes that we've made. Accessory structures, and I'm sorry, my computer and my screen up here are going back. I can't see, so. In fact, maybe I've got one. Shit, mine's over here. So page 31, accessory structures less than 1,200 square feet in Shoreland District, RR5, and the sensitive shoreland areas. Nothing is changing, still over-the-counter permit. But in the limited commercial, downtown district, the waterfront, and the commercial light industrial, it now would require a conditional use permit. And then accessory structures greater than 1,200 square feet in the Shoreland District, They are not allowed over 1,200 square feet unless you have 2+ acres, then you need a conditional use. In the RR5, you'd need a conditional use over 1,200 square feet. Same with the sensitive shoreline, that would be a 2+ acres would require a conditional use. Anything less is not allowed. And then anything over 1,200 square feet would require a conditional use in the limited commercial, downtown, waterfront, and industrial/commercial. Part of that is this allows the city to have a little bit of teeth as far as being able to regulate some of the uses that are going in the limited commercial, industrial, along with the aesthetics that go with certain buildings, because we are establishing higher architectural standards, especially in the corridor, and so we want to be able to take a closer look and make sure those are being met and regulated. And then going down a light item, auxiliary quarters in all commercial districts, downtown, limited commercial, waterfront, and industrial, we took out. And so Planning Commission and staff decided that we do not want living quarters in the business district or the limited commercial and industrial. Moving down, we also took out, going along the same theme there, we took out single family and two-family dwelling or duplexes in those commercial districts. Again, those three, the auxiliary quarters, two-family, and two-family dwelling, they were conditional use before. And so we are eliminating those in those districts. If you flip to page 32 on the next page, the only change that we made, I'll highlight, we do have a line item that says commercial storage building / storage unit rental. So that reiterates, just what our commercial storage says about it just needing to be rented and or leased. But then we added a line item under that says commercial, it is on there, on the right here. Commercial storage rental building / buildings containing independent bays need to be greater than 800 square feet. And that would require a conditional use permit. And I'll get into that a little bit later, but the Planning Commission and city staff decided to have no mini storage in the community as far as small buildings with independent bays, less than 800 square.
None in the city? There's currently one here that was just built not too long ago.
And then flipping the page, it was out of redundancy. We took out storage buildings, commercial storage buildings as a performance standard because we have it on the previous page as commercial storage building for rent and or lease. They were contradicting each other, so we took that out. And then below you can see we put a note that says see provisions for the corridor overlay in section 26-381, then refer to underlying districts. Because we made fairly few changes, we didn't need to add land use table items for the corridor overlay district. I'm going to jump around a little bit. We're going to jump to page 48 in our packet. So we added, this just highlights the corridor overlay districts. So corridor overlay district, the purpose of this district is to protect and enhance the aesthetics of the city of Cross Lake's main entrances and corridors by encouraging sustainable development that respects the environment and upholds the community's Northwoods character. Certain land uses are prohibited in this district along with greater regulations and architectural standards to ensure protecting the beauty of Cross Lake long term. Number two, the standards of the overlay district are within the boundaries of 400 feet from each side of the road right-of-way of County Road 16, 3, 66, 36, and 37. The corridor overlay district prohibits the use of commercial storage, including but not limited to mini/self-storage. And then refer to Article 29 for greater architectural standards regulated within this district. So that's what we'll get into next. And then, yeah, any questions along the way, feel free to ask. But going into architectural standards within, within the corridor, but then also in the downtown district. But we added section 20. Yeah, on the right-hand side there. We added in the purpose and intent, building design, exterior building materials, and colors shall blend into and enhance the city's existing Northwoods environment and avoid adverse visual effect. Just more verbiage to back up kind of the comprehensive plan, the intent of where we want to go with development and structures moving forward within the city.
Paul, I need a little clarification on something. Same page, 48, up at the top, you've got the minimum lot area square foot, 20,000 feet. Minimum lot width, 100 feet, right? And then you've got a structured lot line setback, 30 feet from each lot line. So you've got a minimum 100-foot lot, and you're going to pull it in 30 feet, so you got a 40-foot building envelope? Am I reading that right?
No. Structure lot line setbacks, that would be 30 feet from the road right, no, hold on.
Third
Oh,
column.
so, no, that would just be if there was residential abutting commercial in that regard. That's not any changes that we're making right now. That just happened to make it on here, but that reads, it's 5 feet from other commercial. So if you had a commercial butting up against another commercial, it's just a 5-foot setback. If you had a residential, then it would be 30 from just that side.
Okay, and that hasn't been practiced.
That is what is currently in our ordinance. Whether it has or has not been practiced, that I don't know.
There was no
Doesn't
change to
seem
that.
to me that it has been practiced.
Paul,
Whether it's sideline or rear lot, it's 30 feet if you're next to a resident. Okay.
excuse me, Paul.
Yep,
That same page, the structure height has changed.
correct, and I'm gonna go back to that.
You're gonna go back? Okay.
Because yes, that is gonna be part of the architectural standards.
Okay.
So again, going to page 91 in the packet. So, all of the changes that have been made are either in the new corridor overlay. So we've now got new sections that say like limited commercial corridor overlay district. So we've made changes to commercial and then industrial corridor overlay districts, but those same architectural standards we placed on waterfront commercial district and the downtown district. So I can read those. Those state that that there is glass on any front facade shall be a minimum of 5%, with non-front facades consisting a minimum of 2.5% glass.
Can I just ask,
Yep.
I mean, how did you come up with the 5%? It seems like a really small area of window.
Yeah, that was, through our workshops and community input, that was the number. We did have it higher, but that was the number that we came up with and felt comfortable with.
And if you put glass in garage overhead doors, would that be included in the glass?
Yes.
Okay, just curious.
Other changes, if you go down to I, architectural metal panels shall be limited to a maximum of 25% on any front facade, and non-front facade shall be no more than 75% of one approved material type unless there is a differential in color or material. J, building design, exterior building materials and colors shall blend into and enhance the city's existing Northwoods environment and avoid adverse visual impact. We put that twice just to make it a known fact. Overhangs to be a minimum of 24 inches on all sides. Height to the peak shall be a maximum 35 feet with a roof pitch of 412 minimum. And then that 35 feet maximum height, we changed that to 35 feet in all districts. And before our ordinance read to the mid-peak, we changed it to state that is the maximum height of the structure. And so those same architectural standards apply to the waterfront commercial district, the limited commercial corridor overlay, the downtown commercial district, the commercial light industrial corridor overlay district, and then the outside of the corridor, but still limited commercial and light industrial, those did not change. And if I'm not being clear or this is confusing, don't hesitate to ask. And then we just changed the wording, but I'll read it, number 8. Just states other materials, so materials not specifically listed may be approved for use by the zoning administrator and or the development review team, and shall review and make recommendations to the planning commission, board of adjustment regarding the use of those materials. Any questions on architectural standards? And we can jump back into any on all of these too, but
So what if somebody wants a building higher than 35 feet? They got to come in and
for a variance,
ask
yes,
for it?
correct.
Okay.
And just to go off of that, page 137. So in definitions, height of structure, the vertical distance between the mean natural grade at the building or 10 feet above the lowest ground level, whichever is lower, and the peak of the highest point of the structure. And, oh, that didn't get in there, but this one is the correct one, the diagram. It shows, it did show the mid-peak, and this one just has the, going all the way up to the peak. So the highest point of the building. And again, that is on all districts. And then our last definition is we added mini/self-storage, which states a type of commercial storage fully enclosed building or buildings containing independent bays 800 square feet or less in area, which are leased to individuals for the storage of private property, household items, and or other goods and materials are prohibited.
Anywhere.
That is anywhere.
Can I just clarify one thing with you?
Yep.
Regarding the single-family dwelling or two-family
Sure.
dwelling and the light commercial, downtown commercial, et cetera, et cetera. That wouldn't prohibit, like, say, someone putting an apartment above their business or living above their business?
It would. So multifamily is still allowed in the limited commercial district. But if you wanted to put an apartment above your principal structure, it would not be prohibited. You could come in for a variance, but
Okay.
Okay, should we open it up for
yeah.
public?
And just the one quick last item. So down here at the bottom right, we just reconfirm that accessory structures with a footprint greater than 1,200 square feet shall require a conditional use permit. So we added that.
Okay.
Just before we open it up, just a couple of other notes that the Planning Commission, we talked about, especially in the limited commercial district and, what we, why we thought use was of concern and why we thought moving away from permitting accessory structures. One of the reasons is, well, if you were to establish a business, that's really what a commercial district is used for, is to grow the business development of a town. But you also need a parking plan. You know, that we've talked more and more about parking in this community than anything. You need a parking plan, you need a lighting plan, you need screening of your trash. You need to come in with a whole set of permitted regulations that you need to abide by. You're allowed up to 50% impervious for a business use, but that also includes parking in your 50%. Right now, an accessory structure is personal use, it's a residential use, so we've been allowing 50% impervious structures without parking, without lighting, without, you know, all of these regulations that the business district is having. If you wanted a business, and let's say somebody wanted to turn one of these accessory structures into a business one day, they couldn't because they wouldn't have the impervious to do that, because they wouldn't have parking, they wouldn't have a lot of these other things, and so we'd be kind of stuck with a residential use, a personal use in that district. And so it just prohibits sustainable growth for our business district long-term when we're stuck with accessory structures for personal use. And we're also not, we're not forcing accessory structures or personal use to hook into our city sewer, which our comprehensive plan states that, you know, the business district, if possible, to hook onto existing city utilities. And that's why we put in our city sewer, our public utilities, is to help grow the community, be more economic, or be more environmentally friendly. So it's another reason a business district should be for the business, because a business coming in is going to be held to a much higher standard than an accessory structure and a personal use. And then from an environmental standpoint too, we've got a lot of accessory structures that are taking up a lot of impervious that are for a single use versus job growth, multi-use, you know, the list goes on and on. So those are some of the other things that we just talked about throughout our workshops as far as just accessory use in our commercial district. So
Okay?
I think that sums it up for me. But yeah, happy to obviously be here for questions.
Don't go too far.
Yeah, I might
Have
just
a
go
panic
sit
attack?
next door.
Okay, folks, we're going to open it up for public forum. I just urge you to not get into some long stories. Hopefully, there's a lot of you that got something to say. So let's be, you know, mindful of time. Okay, so it's open up,
Name and address.
name and address, yeah.
Okay, let's let Paul get his computer over there first. So somebody doesn't get too animated.
Paul, that was a good presentation, thank you.
Well, thank you.
A lot of time and effort, I know. Sweat and tears.
Come on, this is like the high school prom and the music is playing. We need somebody to start dancing.
Think you're ready for this?
All right, Dean, come on. I've been rehearsing for this all day.
That's the way.
You've got a prepared written statement here?
You know, Dave, in 52 years up here doing this, I've never done a written statement before.
But you have one tonight?
I have one tonight.
Awesome. Okay,
That's how important I feel this is.
good, okay.
My name is Dean Egena. I live at 13116 Fawn Lake Road. I'm here representing Fawn Lake Park Development on County Road 120. I'm here tonight to petition the council to remove the commercial light industrial zone district from the moratorium and to clarify the ordinance pertaining to commercial and personal storage. In the past 4 years, we platted 29 lots in 2 separate phases. We built 21 buildings. We raised the tax base from $30,450 to $6.3 million. In addition to raising the tax base, we paid $43,500 in park dedication and approximately $35,000 in fees and permits. We feel the development's a benefit to the city of Cross Lake. We've never had a complaint. We've never had a police call. We've never gotten a dime from the city for roads, improvements. Now, folks, I'm an old man, and after 52 years, I've recognized that each area will live and die on its natural resource. Our resource is recreation. Cross Lake isn't mining, manufacturing, agriculture, high tech. We're recreation. People come here to have fun. Now, part of that fun are toys. We are one of the best recreational areas in Minnesota. That's not by accident. That's by the people who were here and built the city. With recreation come boats, RVs, ATVs, ice castle, jet skis, pontoons. You name it, and it's here in Cross Lake. These items all need seasonal storage. I remember a time when we complained because people let them sit outside along the house, in the garage, and under the oak tree. And we told them, can't you put them in a building? Now we're telling people you can't have a building. Should they leave them in the yard? We plan to develop an additional 60 acres that is already zoned industrial. That land will create 100 more lots, increase the tax base from 90,000 to 30 million. It'll also add 150,000 to park dedication, as well as approximately 120,000 in city fees and permits. Now, to remove us from the moratorium requires a simple majority of the council. Doesn't require any ordinance change. It's a simple vote that you could do tonight. Now comes the tough part, to clarify the ordinance. I was involved in the 2014 writing of the land use table. And if you look at that table, it says land use table, not building use. This determination that an accessory building was the accessory in the land use table is wrong. The accessory use in the land use table is everything else other than what's specified. We could have used the word other. Because when you write a table, it's not inclusive of every possibility. So that's why storage buildings have been put under accessory use. So your attorney was looking for a way to stop progress. You gave him a task, and he picked on accessory, the word accessory. You have to have a primary first. That wasn't the intent of the ordinance. If this council wants to tell planning and zoning how to define that word, the issue's over. You don't need an attorney. We're self-governing. And I am so confused with Paul's presentation, I don't have any idea what you're planning on doing. Now, the only thing I can say is, maybe this is what happens when states legalize marijuana. I have no other explanation why you want to kill the goose that lays the golden egg, which is recreation, and limit storage buildings. A storage building causes no problems. It adds no expense to the city. It doesn't require police calls, no domestics. It's the perfect expansion for a city, and it drastically increases tax base. Now, we all pay taxes. And if a city doesn't grow, it can't do anything new unless you want to pay more taxes. It can only grow with a growing tax base. This is a source of growing tax base. So that next year, you can buy a new fire truck. And 2 years from now, you can add on to City Hall. Now, I'm open for questions. You said, Dave, you weren't going to carry on a conversation, but I'm open for questions.
Yeah. I don't know how to jump into that with you. You got a lot more years on me.
Well,
Dean, I agree with certainly 90% of what you're saying. Hopefully, the council will have a discussion tonight about the use of the buildings. Not only, the other difficulty it adds is that to police that use is going to be almost impossible.
it is impossible, Dave.
Yeah, so,
I'm not an attorney, but I have had a lot of experience with attorneys. Now, I want the city to realize I own several buildings, and the city has no right to enter those buildings without my permission or a court order.
yeah.
That's it. Now, you're going to write rules pertaining to the use of the building. How are you ever going to monitor that? You can't just walk in and say you're breaking our ordinance. I might shoot you as a trespasser. So you're writing impossible things. I don't understand why. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, why is because it was conflicting in the ordinance. It was brought to our attention, so we're trying to figure out what to do with it.
Dave, for 52 years, it's never been conflicting. It's conflicting because you created a conflict. You had an attorney that you wanted an opinion, and you got one. Now we've got a conflict.
No.
But it was never a conflict before. How can we be so stupid for 52 years?
Well, you know, Dean, with all due respect, there were a lot of complaints about the appearance of some of the storage units.
Okay, so let's address that.
I know,
I agree.
yeah,
But let's address that,
and we plan to,
not the use of the building.
right.
Right.
We got you, Dean.
Now, I'm going to give you an idea. I was going to save this for later on, but I'm going to give it to you now. So when did people start bitching? When the trees came down. Every time a tree comes down, people bitch. I don't blame them. The tree is a beautiful thing. If you want to make Cross Lake nicer, plant trees. Every existing building could have buffer of spruce. And pretty soon you won't see the building. And who cares what they're doing inside the building? It's none of your business. Plant some trees. I'll give you a little more. Let's spruce up Cross Lake. Let's plant blue spruce. Let's become the blue spruce capital of Minnesota. Let's buffer all buildings with it. And let's do it free. I'll put the first $1,000 in to buy spruce.
Dean, I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm going to probably twang a nerve, but that's good. You like that.
Can I make a comment?
Pardon?
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
I'm just going to, I guess, combat you with just one thing. You know, what I do is administer a land use ordinance. Everything I do is about the use of that land. I mean, that's why we have designated districts in this community, is to regulate that. And I will stand true to land use until I get forced out of here, just because I believe that is for a long-term sustainable growth in this community. We need to be true to our land use districts. And that's why, this moratorium came about, is because those land uses were being in question and of concern. And so when you say, well, you can't regulate what people can and cannot do on their land, I mean, that's what a land use ordinance does. I mean, if that's why we don't have businesses in the residential areas. That's why you can't have certain businesses in the Shoreland District or in the RR5. That's why there's industrial. That's why there's downtown. We wouldn't, if somebody wanted to put up a pole building for personal storage in the downtown district, I mean, that would be a different conversation we'd be having right now. I mean, I don't think anyone would want that.
No,
and
it's
so
my
we
turn.
do we do want to regulate what people can and cannot do. I mean, we don't want to be a dictatorship, but we do want to regulate for sustainable growth. That's how every city operates.
Let me explain the difference. You can regulate land use. Land use.
Correct.
You cannot regulate building use. A building is a tool that can be used for multiple purposes. It can be a tire shop one day and a Dairy Queen the next. When you go down that road and think you can regulate that, you're in trouble. Yes, you can regulate land use. That's
Yes.
what the table
And
says.
a building is part of the use.
No, the inside of the building is not part of the use. Well, I'll be the first one to file suit. It's a given. You cannot regulate what I do inside my building, whether it's a home or a business.
It is tied to the use. Yes, what you do inside of your building, you're right, we're not going to go and peek in the windows and make sure that you're doing what exactly you're doing. But when you come to my counter and come for a permit, your structure is tied to the use, just like your home is tied to the residential use.
So now I come in, just an example. This is a great debate. And I tell you, I'm putting up a building. It's going to be a tire shop. You're going to give me a permit. Day after I open, I go broke. Now I'm going to store my boat in there. What are you going to do about it?
Well, I mean, one,
No, just answer the question. What are you going to do about it?
we're a complaint-based system, so if we're a two-person staff. If your neighbor comes and complains and say, hey, we don't have a tire shop going on here, we've got personal storage, then we could use enforcement.
What enforcement?
We can.
You
well,
can't
we can-
fine. A court can fine.
Correct.
You can't assess a fine. What enforcement do you have?
We can assess a fine.
What?
We can assess a fine.
You need to go to law school, son. No, a city does not fine.
We do. We have an administrative fine that we can assess.
No. You can double a permit. You can do certain things that you already charge for. You cannot assess a fine like a court. That takes a judge.
Yes, we can.
It's our legal system.
Yeah, Dean, you and Paul can debate that at another time, maybe.
Yeah,
But
let's not get in the
this
weeds
isn't
too
really
deep
getting
here.
us anywhere, so, yep. Yeah.
Point well
Thank
taken.
you.
Very well heard. Thank you. David?
Hi, my name is David Foos, 11820 Harbor Lane. I'm speaking as a citizen, but I am a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I have 4 points I want to make. They're not all connected, but they're all, I think, on point to the land use. Number one, if anybody here has a concern about their ability to put up a pole shed for storage of their own stuff on their own property, as it's stated by Paul, you need a primary structure first, an accessory structure permit second. But if you have a piece of land that's way out in the sticks and not abutting anything else, you can come before us and ask for a variance and put up a shed to store your stuff. You can also, you have 2 years from the time you buy a piece of property to put up your principal structure and your accessory structure. So if people are concerned about their ability to build a garage first and a house second, there's a way to deal with that. Second thing is, one of the things that people got angry about is cutting down trees. Yep, we all like trees. But look, in the commercial district, that property is owned. It can be built as a business. And if that means somebody wants to cut down those trees to open a business, that's their land. They can do that. If we want to protect trees, we have to do things like designate land as natural, and we need grants and money to buy, to set aside land for natural purposes. Okay, that's how we should be doing that. To criticize a business because they cut some trees down, it's unfortunate, but it's legal and it's allowable. Thirdly, as the commission, we tried to balance what people want to see on the corridors with the legitimate use of businesses in our community. Businesses have a right to thrive, to build, to offer the services that we want. Finally, regarding storage buildings, nothing in what we proposed said you can't have storage buildings. We really just spent a lot of time talking about a couple of things: where they are or where they are not, and what they look like. Okay? So part of the way that we structured this is to do a setback of a certain amount of distance, and whether that's 400 feet or something larger. But the other part of what we did was we said we want to have conditional use permitting, which allows things to come before the Planning and Zoning Commission, where we can talk about things like, what does it look like? What materials are you proposing to use? How big will it be? What colors, the facade and varying architectural things that will make buildings look nicer. So you can have buildings of a variety of uses that at least look nice. So that's what we did. And then, you know, as I stated before, there are other parcels of land, both in and around the city, that are off the beaten path, outside the overlay district, which is our corridors, where people can build storage buildings, be it for commercial use, et cetera, where people can store their stuff. So we did not say you can't build storage buildings. We really focused on where you build them, and especially in the corridors to the city, how they look. I'll stop there.
Thank you, David.
And just to go off of that, and maybe I wasn't clear too, outside of the corridor, but still, yeah, in the limited commercial district and the light industrial, yes, you can build storage buildings like we've been permitting. They just need to be leased and or rented, so it needs to stay under the same ownership, and you can turn around and rent and or lease them for personal storage. They just need to be run as a business because it's a business district. So that's what we decided on.
Thanks, Paul. And by the way, can I just say, I mean, Paul, I know that you know what you're doing, so, you know, any, you know, dispute that comes up, I, you know, apologize on your behalf, so, okay.
Good evening. My name is Jim Hegland. I've owned a home here in Cross Lake since about 1987. And first of all, I'm going to say is I'm not opposed to storage buildings. I'm opposed to what happens when they're allowed to come in and what the destruction of the neighborhood takes place in the process of doing that. And particularly, my home is on Park Drive. That is right adjacent to this large new development. There's supposed to be 31 new storage buildings coming in right behind me. And that's really the crux of my concern. Again, I didn't own that 40 acres of land. If I did, I wouldn't have cut all the trees down, but I didn't own it, so I really can't tell anybody what they can do with their own property. That's their business. But what I've seen happen in this city is I've got neighbors just down the street from me where they had storage buildings that were put in right behind them, and promises were made about setbacks and buffers and things like that. None of that occurred The city has not done anything to enforce it. So now I've got neighbors that have large white storage buildings that are literally 10 feet from their back property line. They blot out the morning sun. It's ridiculous. Now, in the new development that's right next to me, I did have some personal assurances and promises from Dan Miller, who was kind of leading the charge on that particular project. And I understand he's not involved anymore. But what's happening now is the buffer that Dan had promised me behind my property to the development, it's disappearing every day. The road is getting bigger and bigger, and they haven't even started clearing to put in buildings there yet. So by the time it's all said and done, that 38 acres of 200-year-old timber is probably going to be down, 75% of that timber is going to be gone by the time they put in this giant road in there. So part of my concern is storage buildings make pretty good neighbors as far as I'm concerned. They don't make a lot of noise. You don't see the people very often. That's good. My concern is the future light pollution that's going to happen. People are going to have outside lights on right behind my house. Don't want that. The water runoff from this giant road that's been put in there, along with 31 giant buildings that's going to be put in there, there's going to be a lot of water, and my property just happens to be on the low end of that. Now, Dan told me that the city planner had told him he had to put in a berm back there to stop the water to keep it onto that property. You do that, now you just destroyed some more 200-year-old pine trees that are sitting back there that can't stand to be standing in water. I don't know how you're going to keep the water from coming onto my property, and I don't know how you're going to not kill the rest of the trees that are there unless something else is done. I'm concerned about you go and you start putting in all these storage buildings, and I see a lot of storage buildings in this city that have become living quarters. And I heard at the last meeting that I came to, well, that requires a variance. Well, I've seen in this city, it doesn't take much with a little bit of money to get a variance, and you get pretty much anything you want. And the people that are buying these buildings, putting up these $300,000 deals, that's what it's gonna cost by the time you buy the land to put up a building. If they gotta shell out some more money to get a variance, it's not that big a deal. And now you've got people that are gonna be living in these storage buildings, and now you've got weekend warriors that are be coming up here. That's where they store their snowmobiles and their boats, and they come up with their buddies. Now you got noise back there that's never been there before. Not very pleased about that. But primarily, my concern is the city really needs to address when you're gonna have this expansion of storage buildings. First of all, I think it's a blight and an eyesore in the community to allow them to be built in adjacent residential areas. We've got so much vacant land just outside of town. I don't know why there isn't some moratorium on putting buildings within the city limits or within the residential areas. So my primary concern here tonight is how you folks plan on enforcing the buffers between this kind of commercial development and residential people like myself. Now, I've heard before that, well, there's only a few people on Park Drive that are affected by that, so it's really not that big a deal. Unfortunately, that's not exactly the case. There's at least 12 people in our development that are directly adjacent this property. And I'm on the board of directors with our association, and we've got 82 lot members that are all affected by this because our association directly abuts on this. And now people got to drive through this new commercial district, and you can imagine how many boats and trailers and crap that's going to be going in and out of there on a very small road. East Shore Road is not designed to handle that kind of traffic coming in and out of that area. It's going to be a nightmare. So we're not pleased about some of the things that have developed. So I would just really appreciate if the city could take a hard look at what kind of setbacks and buffers you're going to hold these people accountable for when they're building this kind of stuff next to residential property. You know, my property needs to be protected like anybody else's. So if you clear cut that land that's behind all these buildings, and right now the ordinance, the way I see it, it's a 10-foot buffer. That's nothing.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim.
Joel O'Leary, 14791 River Bluffs Road. I serve on the Planning and Zoning Committee. I'm going to try to be brief here. The moratorium was put on, and then as the Planning and Zoning Board, we were charged with that to figure out what needed to be done. Now, I'm talking to you folks, but I wish I could talk to the people behind us as well. We were given the charge because this city has become known as Tin City. Our charge in what we've presented here tonight, which took a lot of time, was beautification of the main corridor, and that's it. Now, we had an opportunity to look at some of the other ordinances and tighten them up a little bit because there was some redundancy, there were some holes that were in that, and that's why we've made a few other changes. But our main charge was just to beautify the main corridors. Why? Because this is our city, and we want it to look beautiful for now, for the next 20 years, for the next 50 years. A couple other things I want to say, and I wish Dean was still here so he could hear it, but maybe somebody will take. Dean's back, okay. We do have ordinances for good reason, because there are certain things that we want done in certain areas of this community. For example, in the industrial zone, we are not to have residents living in the industrial zone, and we do have that currently. Now the problem, and I bring this to you, the council, is how will you enforce that? What good is an ordinance if you can't enforce it? Well, excuse me, Dean. If you can't enforce it, then do we really need the ordinance? I believe we do need the ordinance, and you need to find a way to enforce it. The next thing I'd like to say is there's certain people in the audience here that were part of our workshops. I'm going to mention Danny Miller, Jeff was here, Mr. Allen was here as well, and they offered up their opinions, and we heard them, and we included their opinions in what you have in front of you. For example, Danny Miller brought to us architectural standards. So when somebody wants to build something and it requires a PUC, we're going to look at those architectural standards. Is there some subjectivity to those? Absolutely. Are we going to be hard and difficult on them? Absolutely. The reason being is if they're going to build something like the last gentleman who was up here, if somebody pulls a permit, we're going to ask about screening. How do you plan to screen your building from the people who live behind it? What does your water retention program look like? If you don't have that, developers, don't come before our board, because you'll be wasting your time. There are people in this community who have been here for a long time, and I respect that, and I respect them. But their tenure should not give them the rights to be able to dictate what's going to happen in the future. Maybe it's time for a change. In closing, I just want to say our charge was to look at the main corridors in this community and offer up some way to beautify them so that we don't become known as Tin City, but rather a beautiful city. That's all I have to say in the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Who's next? Dan, come on up.
I was kind of thinking I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but it doesn't look like anything.
You've said that before.
Yeah, I did. But this time I meant it.
Like I have, like I have.
Dan Miller, 37839, County Road 66. I just have a few comments, or questions actually, on some of it. The height restriction, we've got at 35 feet. Does that pertain to residential housing also?
Correct, yeah, that pertains to pretty much every district. We made 35 feet to the peak, not the mid-peak.
So I think on commercial, I think you're right on task. I think we stick with the 35, but there's an awful lot of houses here that are going to be out of the realm if you go that direction. 2 stories and a roof line, you're over 35, because you really only get 25 because the bottom 10 feet is a walkout. So that we might want to reconsider. Maybe just stay with the one you've got on residential, change the limited commercial and the industrial at 35 feet. I think that's very sufficient. The other thing is, next question, if you're building storage in limited commercial or industrial or wherever you're putting storage up, and it's a commercial storage, so it would be permittable. it would not be, can a privateer come in and buy a lot in limited commercial and just lease it back to himself? Is that how you explained it, Paul? I mean, if that's the case, that's fine. Otherwise, I'm gonna ask the city to just allow personal storage. And if you wanna hang an architectural standard on it, I mean, I've sat with these guys on the architectural standard. I think, you know, it's looking pretty good. I'd like, everything in the corridor, I think, should be subject to an architectural standard. And the stronger the better. The one thing we really didn't tackle is outside storage. And I'm not a fan of outside storage. So something to consider. But Paul, going back to that question,
Yeah.
if I buy a lot in a commercial district and put up a storage building for rent, which would be a commercial use, can I, if I own it in a shell company, can I rent it to myself?
I mean, I would say no, because it's really not a business. You're not renting it or lease it to somebody else. I mean, you're using it for yourself. I get that
Right,
it's,
but I mean, we're kind of splitting hairs whether I build a building and I lease it to Dave or Sandy or Aaron, or whether I lease it to myself, it's still the same. It's storage. I mean, I think we're splitting hairs. And as far as the people in back of the development that I did own, I understand their concerns. But what's permitted back there is stuff that, it's noisy stuff. You know, you could put a repair shop back there, you could put a tire shop back there, you could put multiple things back there that would produce a lot of noise, where the storage district, it's pretty quiet use. And, you know, I'm not advocating for living quarters in any buildings moving forward, and what you guys decide is up to you. It really, I have no opinion on it. I think that personal storage, whether you want to call it commercial storage or whatever you want to call it, it's too hard to control. And whether or whether the next guy goes in and he puts a construction business in commercial storage and then sells the business, and the next guy that buys it does something different, how do you enforce it? I mean, you can't send Paul or Cheryl out to try to figure out what the hell all these people are doing in their buildings. It would be tough. And I'm not advocating for living quarters in any of this stuff. I'm just bringing up the question, how do you handle it? I think you're going down a slippery slope, and I just think it's a tough road to follow. And there's other people in town here that have commercial property. I'm sure they're wondering about how they're going to develop their property someday. But I think that personal storage is a quiet use. If you want to hang an architectural standard on the stuff out of the corridor, I don't care one way or another. But on the corridor, absolutely should have it. I think if we had an architectural standard on the corridor in the beginning, we might not be here today. Clarifying the ordinance, I think it's great. But I and Dave both talked to Chris Pence. He was the architect of the ordinance. He told myself, he says, you know, it's an older ordinance, it needs some updating, your city is growing, but he pointed the same thing out. Do you want Paul and Cheryl out chasing around to try to figure out what the heck's going on in these buildings? And, you know, if you just make it an allowable use, the problem's over. And as far as people owning buildings and stuff, if you want to run an architectural standard or something like that, I mean, I don't care. I don't think you need it off of the corridor. On the corridor, you absolutely need it, and I would love to see you hang some type of a add to it so there's no outside storage, so there's not junk sitting all over. But I don't think we really went down that road with the commission, but it's something to consider. But I guess, you know, if we can permit everything as commercial storage, and commercial storage is, I believe, and I'm asking the question, a primary use?
yes, if that is the principal use, it would be, yeah, commercial storage would be a
Okay.
principal use.
So, you know, if you want to leave it like that and allow people to buy property, build buildings, and lease them out to whoever they want, even themselves, it's one way around it. But, I mean, we're just splitting hairs here at that point. It doesn't matter who it is that's renting it. It's still personal use if it's a commercial building. Let's just make it allowable and get by it and keep on rolling and move forward with the architectural standard on this thing.
The trouble with your particular deal, Dan, is you've got residents on the backside, and you've got the old folks on the other side of you.
Correct.
So your chunk is a very sensitive chunk.
Okay, not mine anymore, but go
Okay,
ahead.
but the chunk that you developed
Right.
is a very sensitive chunk.
Right.
Screening is a huge issue. Now, how much screening can we do there, though? Because you got half-acre lots. Half-acre lots on limited commercial outside the business district, I think, is tough. A half-acre lot is 100 by 200, right?
It is, it's
Basically.
20,000 feet, yeah.
Yeah, but
Yep.
it's basically
It's
100 by
Basically, you've got to
200.
be a minimum of 100, and you've got to be a minimum of 2
And if you got a
feet.
building that's 50 feet wide and 80 feet long,
Yeah,
and you got parking and you got a driveway on it, you're taking away a lot of room to put
Right.
screening in.
so commercial property holds a 50-foot setback, or a 50% on impervious coverage.
Well, sure.
All the engineering that was done on that property was over-engineered. That property is set up to hold a 6-inch rainfall in 24 hours. There isn't another property in
I'm
the
sure we'll hear
city.
back from Mr. Hegland if it doesn't, because it
It-
sounds like
and I-
he's a little threatened by that.
Well, he's worried about the berm in back, and he's also worried about the water, and I understand that. I get it. I've talked to him about it. We've had quite a few conversations on the phone. I'm not in favor of cutting all the trees. I'm in favor, or was, of meandering that berm around, saving the trees. So, the other thing that nobody really ever brings up is, I mean, the property's there. Who owns it? Who owns it? They can do what they want. But
Yeah,
the
and-
neighboring properties, what are they required to do for screening? You know, if people clear out to their property line on a residential property and mow it, that's what they do. But, I mean, everybody's responsible in some way to have some type of screening. I get it. The conditional use that we're talking about, it addresses that pretty well. I think, you know, the people that are on that commission, I think, you know, if we get some screening, if that sticks, the CUPs on all this stuff, it kind of sounds like it's going to. I'm not saying I'm, on the main drag, I'm for it. On the back property, I'm not for it. But on the main drag, absolutely. I get that people coming into town want to see things looking nice. I've said it before, I've never been offended by driving into Cross Lake, and I've never seen anybody move out of Cross Lake because of what the buildings look like. You can drive down any road here that you want. There's million-dollar homes, and there's knocked-down shacks, and everybody is happy, and everybody's at the cabin, and that's just kind of the makeup of a vacation area.
I know, but as time goes on and we get more and more of them on the corridor, you may not hear it, I hear it all the time.
Yeah, but
about
those
Tin
people, I
City,
mean,
so.
it's great that you hear it. Everybody hears it. But if somebody really cares about it, like Jim, he shows up, he says something.
Yeah, that's right.
There's not a
I
lot
know.
of people showing up.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, we've had, you know, we'll probably have a couple more people here show up, but how many people live in this town? 2,500, 2,700?
Yeah.
So Jim shows up, and maybe 2 or 3 other people get up and speak.
There's
I
not
don't
too
think
many
there's
guys
any
from your
letters.
side of the fence that are showing up either unless they've got a direct interest in it. You know, I mean, there's
Right.
3 of you here tonight and you're all being directly affected by this and you're here at
And to
every
be honest
meeting.
with you, if we weren't developing property, and we were, again, not me, but if we weren't involved in it, we probably wouldn't be so concerned about it, because we're all halfway through this when all this stuff happens. So you kind of caught everybody that's involved in development and threw them a curve. So they're all like, oh, what the hell are we gonna do with this investment now? So if none of us had started and none of us had owned the property, we wouldn't be talking about this. We'd just do something else.
So, you know, the standards that have been developed, 2-foot overhangs, 2.5% and 5% glass on the sides of the building.
Yep.
And a change in wall color, to me, is not gonna change the appearance driving into town. You know, to me, that's not enough. And maybe that's something we gotta work on moving forward.
So I know your big hangup is you want a change in the roof line, right?
Yeah.
Yep, well, if you want to do that, I guess that's what you do, is you change a roof line. But if you're doing storage buildings and they're not on the main drag, and they're commercial storage, if it's a business, bang for the buck. You get your most bang with the straight roof
If it's
line.
outside of the sight lines, it would make a difference. 103 storage is great.
Yeah. Agreed.
Dean's development is great, nobody sees them. You know, he's deep enough, it doesn't affect anybody. It's the ones that affect, and that's a hard thing to,
So but the
Control,
stuff that I
you know?
developed is out of the sight line also. I mean, there's 400-foot lots in front, and all those buildings are going up. You're not going to be able to see any of that stuff off of Highway 3.
well, the old folks at Golden Horizons are gonna be able to see it, and the neighbors behind are gonna be able to see it.
But we already agreed to screening and all that stuff, which will happen.
Yeah, Okay, and
So,
I got a
there you
question
have
for
it.
Dean on screening too, but I'll let him come up after you.
So,
And then-
but I don't think I've got,
I was
I
gonna
guess
say-
my biggest question was on the commercial, so.
Yeah, and I'll address that. Well, a couple of things, and I fully admit that it can appear that it's splitting hairs as far as who you can lease or rent to and leasing it back to yourself, but I guess out of principle, a couple of things. One, that's why we did move to conditional use, so we can put conditions on it. So that conditional use is tied to the owner of that, or the use of that, that lot. And then if you do turn around and sell it, and somebody does want to change the use, we do have a change of use permit. And in both the conditional use, both in a change of use permit, you do need to provide the use, you need to provide a stormwater management plan, you need a parking plan, a lighting plan, you know, all of the requirements that are for a business. And, you know, the city doesn't regulate covenants. And so for private storage, you know, the city really can't, I mean, there's our nuisance policies that we have that are pretty minimal. We don't have a ton of teeth as far as regulating outdoor storage. And those are things that we can add, but we don't currently have them. And so conditional use is also a way to enforce that as well. And so,
Paul, let's say if you own a storage building or it's a commercial storage or whatever we decide to call it, you're sitting at the building, you're leasing it out, whatever, all of a sudden you sell the building. Next guy that comes in decides he's gonna run a construction business or tile shop or whatever out of there. How many of those people have ever come in and done a change of use? I've never heard of anybody doing a change of use in Cross Lake.
we handle quite a few change of use.
Okay, all right.
We really do. Now, we don't have all that many businesses, but in the last year, we've probably had 5 or 6
Right.
change of use. I mean, every business and the old Judy's House of Gifts
Sure.
had a change of use
With
and
the-
had to go
They
through
had
the
a
process.
conditional use that ran with that though, right?
Well, yes.
Yeah, yep, so
Yes.
that's why that came up, but, all right, well, thanks for answering the question.
And yeah, I guess along with a business owner is going to be held to, or in theory anyways, a business owner running a storage building is going to take potentially more pride in their business versus individual owners
So I
coming
would
up
argue
twice,
that
coming
and
up
say
twice,
that-
coming up twice a year using it for personal storage, in theory, but it's all tied to a business. You know, the building, the use, the ownership, you know, being able to
And I'd say
put
just the
condition,
opposite. I'd
being
say
able
that
to
a
put
person
conditions on it.
Takes a lot more pride in something they own than a business owner just trying to make a buck. It just, look at the apartments in the world, over time, how run down they get, they're commercial businesses. Look at the houses. Most of the houses that people own, they take a little more pride in their projects and their homes, keep things up better. I mean, that's the goal at least, but private ownership, I think, is a much neater, or a better looking product at the end of a 15-year run. The other thing is on storage, if you put storage up, it's a quiet development in Cross Lake. Cross Lake is not going to be a booming city. This is not going to be a metropolis. This is going to be a bunch of people that come here on the weekends. There's some locals that hang out here. It's a great community. We have like the best stuff in the world. We've got pickleball courts and we've got a community center. I think we just keep that ball rolling. If you put up commercial storage or personal storage and people decide to change it into a business, they come in for the change of use and deal with it then.
Okay,
All right.
let's move on.
That's it.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
Joe O'Leary, once again, directed towards you, Paul, regarding what Danny Miller just said about the 35-foot height. That is from ground level. We allow an extra 10 feet for walkout, correct?
Yes.
All right, just wanted the council to know that it's not 35 feet. It's 35 feet from ground level up. Plus, and we have this before our committee already, if somebody wants to go more than 35 feet, they just come to us for a variance.
Yep.
For example, the Loon Center will be coming before us sometime soon because they're going more than 35 feet.
Thank you, Joe.
One other point I wish to make before I leave. It sounds to me like Danny Miller is really encouraging you folks to develop a position within the city for code enforcement, because he's right. Paul and Cheryl are both very busy. I know that you're putting your budgets together, whether it's this year's budget, next year's budget, or the year after. We should think about code enforcement so that we can enforce the ordinances that we have in this community.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. You might have to just leave if you want.
Hi, I'm Pat Barrett. I live on Park Drive, pretty close to Jim. And there are about 5 or 6 of us here that are very concerned about that property. I'll be really short, but we are concerned what that buffer is what we're looking for in the water runoff and whatsoever. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, Pat,
Thank
so
you.
those are conditions they can put on approval of it, so.
Yeah,
And
and-
they gotta be just tough conditions.
And another thing is when Dan does sell it, or he already did, the people that eventually own it, what kind of rules do they should have to follow the city rules that you guys have enforced
Yep.
or have in there. So that's what I'm looking for too.
That's why the CUP is sitting there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Dave, you got an opinion too?
Dave Gunn, 36586 Channel Lane. And I have some questions and confusion. So the corridor that we're protecting, which is essentially 866 feet, what is the intended use for those properties?
Right. All of the same uses will pertain. The corridor overlay, it's called an overlay district just because it'll set on top of the existing uses. And so really the only thing in the overlay district right now, and we put, part of the reason we did an overlay district is so we can, we know that this is a little bit of a work in progress. It's a big thing to add, but it's so we can be flexible. But right now, anything inside of the corridor prohibits storage, commercial storage, and or self / mini storage. And then there's those added architectural standards. So the same uses still apply. All of the existing, RR5, Shoreland District, limited commercial, industrial, are all the same. It's the same uses.
So that corridor, there's 5 highways, right?
Correct.
And how many linear feet or miles and parcels does that include?
That offhand, I don't know. It's a pretty significant amount if you count all of 3 and 66.
So that would be part of what I think you need to include in your plan is the economic impact of it. I mean, you have responsibility for land use. Property taxes are like 70% of this city's budget in revenues. So you have a big influence on what happens and doesn't happen. Do you have metrics on how many permits for storage buildings have been submitted this year or last? Is it half of them? Is it 5 of them?
I don't have the metrics in front of me, no.
That's an important metric because you should be encouraging growth in the city. You talked about that, and what was your word? Orderly development? What kind of land use are you soliciting or encouraging or asking for in orderly development? I mean, you quickly said manufacturing of goods and or products. How many of those do we have now? Or how many have we had the last 20 years?
Yeah.
Not many.
No, and I agree.
And the one we got now is, having some slack in their business and so forth. So it's really important. I don't think this proposal is complete until you have an economic impact to go along with it. Because land use is a big part of what this whole city's budget's about. And to Dean's point, it's a big draw on how people decide to come here. And they're not looking for great manufacturing jobs. They're producing goods and services, they're looking for recreation. And to support that, pole barns are a big part of it, or storage.
Sure. And again, we're not limiting the availability to build storage in this community. I mean, we're taking it out of the corridor, but we still have districts, but we just want them to be run as a business, because that is what, the proper land use does. And we felt as a committee and as a staff, that's going to be more sustainable long-term. It invites connection to city infrastructure, which we're not enforcing right now. And so, I mean, to your point, I mean, yeah, feasibility study or, you know, what are the economics long-term? Those are, I mean, hard to pinpoint.
And you also, I mean, you started your discussion talking about, didn't catch the numbers quick enough, the number of square miles available or parcels available in Cross Lake, and a third are one constriction with government, I think, or?
Yeah, roughly 1/3 is all water, roughly a third is county/state land that will forever, you know, be state land, and then a third is privately owned or.
Right. The third is what you have to work with to do stuff.
Yes.
And so as you get these requests for land use, you got to divvy it up in that third. And if you're holding back in hopes that someone's going to build a manufacturing company here, I think you're making a mistake. So
what company
I
did
just,
you say?
what?
Oh.
So I just think there's.
I don't think we're holding out for something specific. I think we are wanting to preserve the ability for somebody to develop something that is the proper use.
Sure, but
Because if we fill up all of our current limited commercial or light industrial, we handcuff a proper use in those districts.
Well, you say proper use, but did you hear what Dean said? I forget the numbers. What did you say? You developed a property that had a $30,000 tax base to $6 million or something? Yeah. I mean, whether you think about it or not, the decisions you're making about this and the dream you have about this beautification and so forth, not that anybody doesn't want it, but on balance, you got to look at what the economic impacts are too, plus and minus. And not having that in this 16 pages, I think, is just a big void. I'd encourage you to do that.
Sure.
That's it.
Good point. So what my concerns are the architectural standards. Broken roof lines. Build a building that's got some feature to it, some kind of character. You guys know, I've told you. A 2-foot roof overhang and a 5 and 2.5% window, that it helps, but it's not going to cut it. So that's what I'd like to see. And that we could do within the 400 feet you're calling it. You know, I'd like to see it 600 feet, but whatever, so we could have those standards in that. The other thing, as far as the concern of the neighbors and the old folks' home, is the enforcement of screening. And you know, you might have to take away a little bit of property in order to ensure screening. And encourage the neighbors to contribute to the screening, no doubt. You know, we should all put to it. I was over at Golden Horizons, and their memory care is to the rear of that building, and they're just freaking out about the change in the memory care, you know, so whatever. I would show a little respect, Jared. You know, I mean.
Jared Johnson, 3J Development, part of what we're talking about tonight. My mother was in that memory care unit for a number of years and just passed away on Saturday on that. So I do have a heart for that. To be ridiculed and shot down on that, it's important to me. So before you have the facts, let's get that straight. So I just wanted to say that. We met with the owners of the memory care, or the entire unit, and part of our development, in our development agreement, was the screening and following all these standards on that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Sorry for your loss, Jared.
So, you know, in the spirit of moving this along.
Let's say, is it our turn to?
What do you have coming up, other developments that people are knocking on the door saying, we want to get this going, we're going to get this moratorium off? What do you have out there?
Well, I mean, currently, there's the 3 that most everyone know about.
Yep.
I mean, if it's okay to say names, I mean, Jeff McGrath,
Yep.
Dean Agana, and Jared's development. Those 3 right now. I don't know of any other ones that are in the works right now.
So is it okay if I close? Does anybody have urgent they want to say?
Just one quick thing.
Okay, come on, Jeff.
Jeff McGrath, 34420 County Road 3, Northland Pet Lodge and McGrath Holdings. I guess just I don't know, I just encourage you guys to think about your decisions. It does have economic impacts on people. You know, we did our development in good faith. We gave you guys the park dedication fee, all the fees to the city. The planning commission was out there, and at that time, I believe everybody was saying they were in favor of having personal storage out there. So I know maybe the land use table said differently, but if it's, I guess I'd be willing to hear from the commissioners on this too, if they don't feel that personal storage is appropriate back there, which they did a year and a half ago. You know, if that's the case, we would have redesigned our development for a business park and had access off of County Road 3. We did land swap with my neighbor to have it come off the cul-de-sac back there, so we did a lot of extra longer driveway, more development, money to buy the property from our neighbor just to do it the way that the need to be done for storage. So, and now I guess here we sit. I guess I understand we came to commercial storage, but you know, I can't put the land back together and put bigger buildings together.
And your intent is to sell your buildings
Yeah,
for
well,
personal
I'm selling the
storage?
lots. I'm selling the lots. That's my intention.
For personal storage?
Yeah.
Or do you just want to sell the lots? I mean, and that's what those guys are doing now.
Well, it was
Somebody's gonna
designed
be
for
coming
storage,
in.
correct, yes. I guess the other question I have is to the conditional use permit for commercial storage. I guess my question is so if you go on your land use table here for, if I'm a contractor, which I also do that for my other part of business, but if I'm a contractor and walk in and get a permit to build a building, is that correct? If I'm a HVAC or plumbing, is that correct, Paul?
Yeah, if you can establish it as a principal use,
Okay,
and
so-
that's,
so
and
there's-
that's your, and, you know, that's your business.
Right,
is
but
to
so I
run
guess
out of there.
my question on that is, why is that an over-the-counter permit? If I'm gonna do storage or something else, I have to jump through a bunch of hoops. If a building is a building, correct? I mean, if I'm a contractor that has my trucks in there and everything else, I can walk in and get a permit tomorrow. If I'm gonna have the same trucks in there, but lease it, why is that any different? You know, I have to have all these different plans for commercial storage versus a contractor. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. And I just so I'm clear on this, I have property that's on the corridor that, the pet lodge is on the corridor, and I also have a lot that could be for sale on the corridor, and then the development is off the corridor by 700 feet, roughly 600 feet. So I've got both sides. But I guess what I'm getting at is I'm 100% in favor of making the corridor look good and having standards. And even with the commercial off it, if there's certain standards you have to meet, I don't have a problem with that. With conditional use permits, I have an issue because like my business has one for my business to run. I get all my stuff here, bring it to you guys. Nobody once ever asked for it. So I'm not saying we need enforcement, but you guys wanted all these conditional use permits and there isn't any recourse on them. And it's a lot of time and effort for you guys and for us. If you make, my suggestion is if you make and I went to a lot of meetings with these guys this summertime for the commission. If you just come up with a standard and make it a standard and don't give people options, tell them what so if you're gonna buy a piece of property and put up a building, have a set of standards of, hey, like you have to have whatever. Here's what you have to have facing residential. Here's what you have to have, commercial side of it. If you make it less options and just say this is what's required, you're gonna fix all your problems. I guess I'll leave it at that. I mean, there's too much gray.
Yeah.
So, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Jeff.
Dave, I would just like a moment.
I want a moment first. I had a question for you before you left last time.
Okay.
Screening was an issue. When you had your development approved, was screening required or part of the conditions?
No.
It was not, okay.
Mine was.
Okay.
I want you to realize that the growth in Cross Lake is not in commercial use. And my proof is our development. Out of the 21 buildings we've built, 1 is commercial.
Painter?
The painter.
Yeah.
The people that have built the buildings are all part of our community own lake places and need storage. They're not out-of-towners coming in here taking advantage of our ordinances. That's bullshit. Our economic base is recreation. And what a better way to make money and feed the tax rolls than build storage buildings. They require nothing from the city. So consider that.
Yeah.
You have been elected to manage the city.
We just
Not to
got to
tell-
figure out what that look is going to be, Dean.
You can get into looks all you want, Dave. I think it's a rabbit hole,
Yep.
but you can try.
Yep.
But you basically have shut down storage buildings in town. And Paul's idea is to make it so difficult, nobody wants to do it. And I don't understand why.
Yeah.
What is the goal? So.
Appearance. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Oh, God, I was just going to close it.
I'll be brief. Joe Leary. So as the council, you can send this, my guys are going to hate me for this, you can send this back to us with direction. For example, breaks in roof line, allowing personal storage in certain zones. And we can relook at that, we can rework it, we can have another workshop or so, and then come back, correct, Paul?
That's correct.
We can come back to you again, but provide us with some more direction, if you would. I like some of the things you've said here. We'll do our best on it. I think Dean might have a good point. Maybe we do need to allow personal storage in certain areas. But once again, our charge was main corridor beautification. So I don't think it has to be a thumbs up or a thumbs down. You can look at what we've presented with some direction, send it back to Paul. Paul will bring it to us. We'll open it up. It'll be an open forum. All these folks can come once again.
The trouble with that, Joel, is that the sun is really going down on the building season this year, and these
It is.
few of them probably want to
Right
get
on.
something else done.
Right on.
So.
Okay, that's all I've got to say on that, but I do agree to Dean's
If
point.
this was May, that would
Amen.
definitely be the option to take.
Thank you.
And I don't think the moratorium was intended to be permanent. It was just to give us some time to
Right.
figure out what we're doing and what our priorities are.
Mr. Bill.
Yes, sir. Bill Schultz, 13176 Albinson, and I'm part of the Planning Commission. I just wanted to address the architectural standards. We tried to shy away from the architectural standards as much as we could. If we come up with 3 and 4 level fronts and patio doors and whatever else you want to make these things look better, it has to apply to all of them. And there's a lot of them that don't need that. The one that's behind the pet clinic or storage, pet storage. It's back with the toy box. They're not especially attractive, but they would fit in with minimal, not three levels. And that's where the CUPs came in. That gives the Planning Commission the opportunity to put restrictions on certain things and to put certain building standards into buildings that are going in certain areas. So we take Dan Miller's or whoever has bought it, that there would be more, with the CUP, there would be more structure insofar as screening, trees along New Horizon. The people that have the homes along there, that would give the Planning Commission the opportunity to put more trees in there.
Right.
If they're concerned about the water runoff, go with some more stringent standards there. Or get someone else to come on in there and guarantee a certified, whatever they are, water person, to take a look at it and certify that it's going to be okay. That's why we felt that the CUP was an integral part of doing this whole thing, is then we can selectively put standards in the appropriate
I agree with you,
spots.
and that
Okay.
ability to do that should remain, no question.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Bill.
Can I make a closing comment on my end?
Okay.
I mean, when I took on this role, I accepted the role of being the evil planning and zoning administrator. That just comes with, it comes with the territory, and it's what I accept. But I, you know, between the planning commission and my department, you know, we want to be able to make decisions for the community. We don't have an agenda against any individual, against any groups. We want to administer our land use ordinance that's going to be best for our community going forward. And so, yes, I have an opinion, but I try not to have an agenda. And whatever you guys decide, what our city decides to moving forward, that's what me and Cheryl are going to administer. That's what we're going to do. And I definitely want to make that clear. I'm for what's going to be best for this city. And through our workshops, through what we've heard at our glass windows here, what we've heard on the phone is, you know, there is a lot of concern for the type of development that is happening in this community. And so that's what we've been trying to address. And that's what we felt like, you know, we wanted to bring to you guys moving forward. And so I just wanted to make that clear that, you know, I don't. You've done a good job. And I'm not looking for a pat on the back by saying that, but I just wanted to say that, you know, from our city attorney, who started the first of the year, you know, he asked the question, and this is kind of directed to you, Dean, because you said, why do we not want storage in this community? And, you know, our attorney brought the question up to us is, why do we want to fill our limited commercial unit with personal storage? And that's the question that we tried to balance, and that's what we've been struggling with, you know, for the last 6 months is, do we want personal storage? Do we not want personal storage to fill up our entire limited commercial district? So.
We got to get out of here at 7:30, so take as much time as you want.
All right. I just want to point out one thing. The land will exist forever. The use can change. Now, to prove a point, we have redeveloped a lot of Cross Lake in the 52 years I've been here. Where the phone company sits was once a school. Where the new school was once a church. Don't think you're using up the land and that it's gone if you use it for storage and suddenly there's a better use.
Right.
It's called redevelopment. And it happens everywhere.
Okay, Dean, please give us a chance to talk so we can hopefully do something. I hear you. I agree with you. Okay, I'm going to close public forum. Who's got something to say about this?
I'll hop in. I think we all agree with the 400 feet off the right of way. I think we're all in agreement on that. At 400, I think we all agree on.
Minimum.
Right. I'm at 400. But I think what it really comes down to is I drive around town. Manhattan Point is an example. They're cramming in personal storage, which they have every right to do there, but they're building up and they're maxing out their 50% impervious. I feel like the best spot for
About 50%.
Or sorry, 25, sorry. But I feel like personal storage is best suited for limited commercial back with proper screening. If there's proper screening where people can't see it off the beaten path, that's where it should go. A perfect example, Jeff's spot in Toy Box. I mean, it just continues. It's right there. Back in the woods between Golden Horizons and the back of Miller's development, back in there. You're not going to be able to see that from County Road 3. And if there needs to be proper screening with trees and this and that and the other thing, do it the right way so you don't see it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think just because you can't see it from the corridor doesn't mean that it doesn't impact neighbors or people nearby.
Well, of course it does, but that's why we do proper screening.
So there has to, we have.
Essentia Clinic isn't going to go throw in a spot behind the pet lodge or go throw in a spot behind somewhere else. They're going to want to be on the main corridor. A commercial business is going to want to be on the main corridor. That's my
And our
opinion.
fear is that it's gonna be full of storage and the business can't get there, but
We
but
just
we've heard
all,
about that.
we just all said we agree to no 400, or to the 400 feet.
And I have one other thought, I don't know how popular this will be, but I just feel like those people like Jeff and Dean and Jared, people who have already, they jumped through all the hoops, they've already got, made investments. If we could work with them to, create greater screening or, make it more workable for them, then I think, that's something we should talk about, but.
The CUP concept got in there for that very purpose. And that's why the commission sat there and said, the only way we will get what we believe is appropriate is to put the conditional use in there. If you take that out, then you've lost your ability to do that, to protect the people that are back in there and to get protect their property, their trees that they want to keep, that type of thing. That's why we had our engineer in there, and we gave him such a hard time that he overdeveloped it, I think was the term. Right or wrong, I'm not saying it is either, but it's, we have to continue with the conditional use permits. I think that's the key, and that's the key of what they have in here today. Very little of what you've read really changes that much in there. Our issue today is, what do we do for Jarrett, for Jeff, and for Dean?
Right.
That's our
And
issue.
that's the reason I asked the question, is there
Yeah.
somebody banging on the door?
But I think we need to address this so we can go to the next step, which is the moratorium.
Yeah, but there, just to clarify, that might be one thing, but there also is future developments
Right.
continuing on that we need, that we need to make sure that we're accounting for too.
A lot of this land was laid out and put in, whether it was commercial, light commercial, industrial, whatever, way before. I have no idea when that all took place. Dean might have a concept of it, but long time ago. I know that.
I've been zoning the property down there for 45 years.
Okay.
Each time I bought a neighbor, I zoned it industrial.
Yeah.
I knew this day would come that we're gonna need that type of land, not residential, not lake, but we're gonna need storage.
But that's where, 45 years ago is where it all began. So can I get you to start with this, and then let's look at the moratorium? What is good? What is it that?
Well, I don't think we
somebody
can
doesn't
change
want?
anything or we can't vote. I think we got to accept that as is.
Okay.
Or we
Well,
can't,
no,
or
I'm
we
fine
can't
with
vote.
that.
Let me just take the microphone for a second. The things I have a trouble with what's going on here, and Danny, I'm going to pick on you specifically, and you're not going to hear anything you haven't heard before. The half-acre lots next to residential areas in a zoning district. Maybe we could take a look at that. The screening is a huge issue depending on who you're next to. So I don't know how we're going to write that in the rules, but if you're up to a residential area, it's got to be different. Or Golden Horizons, for example, it's got to be different. And then the architectural standards, but I think what I want to do is make a motion to remove the moratorium, let these guys carry on with their life, and have a workshop between the planning and zoning and the council and whoever else wants to come to it, and try to knock this thing out. The reason I asked, is anybody banging on the door, because I want to remove this moratorium, and I was thinking, let's just put another one back on, but I hate moratoriums too.
Dave, upon the development of most of the guys that are here, all the screening's already been included in the agreement.
Okay, but we need to make sure that it's got teeth in
You
it.
enforce it, but it's already.
Yeah, we just got to make sure that 10 feet isn't enough, unless you're going to do a solid spruce hedge.
Yeah,
But
and Dave, just to be clear, as far as allowable uses, we're not changing anything as far as personal storage. As of right now, as our ordinance reads, residential accessory structures, you need a principal
Right.
structure. In the commercial district, the same, you need a principal structure and no personal storage in the commercial. I'm just saying, that's how our ordinance currently reads. That's how our
yes, I would
so
say-
if we take off the moratorium and you say, well, we'll just let them continue to develop, we're not permitting it as of right now. And so a change would have to be made, is what I'm getting
For
at.
example, is almost through his second phase, which he's already done, he's set the standard
Yeah.
for, it's all done. So to hold him up and say you can't finish your last 4 or 5 buildings.
Right.
Unless you can find a cabinet shop to move into them, to me is criminal.
Mhm.
So what I would ask you to do is turn a blind eye to the use. Let these guys do their thing, concentrate more on screening and standards.
So
Turn a blind eye, Dave.
I think
If you do it for him, you do it for everybody.
I think if those 3 developers wanted to come in and ask city council to review their case, I would encourage them to do that, and you guys can, decide what you want to do with those individuals, but we do have to make decisions moving forward just as a city. They're two separate things. We can't.
We have
We
to
have to
look
be
at our history,
consistent.
though, and like they've said many times, we've operated under the same guidelines that we're changing today or this summer, and we've operated and everything has been fine, so.
Well, we're just reinterpreting it the way it should have been
Hey,
reinterpreted.
Dave, to keep them so they can keep going, because they were caught in the middle of this, how about, I'm going to make a motion that we grandfather in Jeff, Dean Agana, and Jared Johnson and what they have going on right now so they can finish it, but keeping the moratorium on so we can further explore this with some of those restrictions in the CUPs a little more.
But you're doing the same thing, you're allowing them a use that is not allowed, right? You can't.
Our current ordinance doesn't allow for it. That's where the problem came in. That's what bit us. I don't like it.
The council can interpret the ordinance, not him. You are our elected officials. You can interpret the way you want the ordinance to read, not him, not your attorney. Do your responsible duty. Determine what you want that ordinance to be, and you don't have to amend it.
I'm all for the beautification and proper screening and all of that.
I think it should be amended, though, I just think it should be amended. I don't disagree with it, and I'd like to.
So what's the solution to get these guys building without having to wait?
Well, my thing is.
Right, but obviously
2 of the 3 were approved all the way through Planning Commission and City Council.
Right.
The 3rd one only needs the City Council approval. Am I correct, Dan?
I'm sorry.
Dean's has already been approved. Everything's been through everything. So has Jeff's, okay?
And so is ours.
Well, not the second one, not the one in back.
No, it's approved.
Huh?
Plat's approved. Sure. Yeah, plat's approved. They're all-
That's approved? Well, they're already approved. Why are we holding them up?
Jump in. Jump in.
Yeah, it's the use that jumped into the.
I think you can grandfather them in as of a date. Use a date to grandfather them in. They were approved as of when, and then we started, determining that we were going to change the way we interpret the ordinance. Thank you.
Again, just technically, a plat does not determine a use. A plat is individual parcels. It can be assumed what they're doing, but a plat does not establish a use. When you come in for a building or a land use permit, that's what establishes the use, conditional use. So technically, I'm just saying technically, what has been permitted was plats, not intended use.
But we're reserving the 400 feet corridor on both sides. So we're not gonna run out of space to put cabinet shops or something in. We're not gonna. So to allow that use, and I think that'll be the first thing on the agenda, is to talk about the use, because that's a big issue here.
Yeah.
So I have a quick question. If we put a moratorium on and we paused building because we were going to revise our ordinance, and this is the new proposed ordinance, aren't we still technically under the old ordinance still operating, but we just put a pause on.
Well, the moratorium helps establish.
But we still have the old ordinance. This is not passed yet.
Writing in the old ordinance is what caused the moratorium.
But we haven't passed our new one that everyone is saying we have a new one about. So why can't these people get grandfathered in?
Put 2-foot overhangs on and windows in the front of the building.
Yeah.
You know,
And-
the use is still in that thing.
If-
That's what's got to be changed.
You know, what I propose is if the council is wanting to go down the direction of grandfathering in, let's call it, for the 3 developers that we've been talking about, we can set up either a special meeting or a city council meeting and have them present, and we can have those discussions there. Tonight is about our current land use ordinance, what we're proposing as a planning commission moving forward, because they're 2 different things. We need to establish what we want for the city moving forward, because it might not be the same as what they're asking for. So it is 2 separate things. I don't want to deny them the opportunity to come in, but I also want to make sure that we are establishing what we want as a city moving forward.
Well, personally, I think there've been a lot of issues raised regarding this new ordinance that I think bears some more discussion amongst the council.
Sure.
And, but I also think that the moratorium was established so we could work on this, but I feel like they should be grandfathered in because of the fact that, you know, they'd already been granted approval, and I think we establish a date, as Shar suggested.
That's what I.
And then just, you know, I mean, other people who come to apply for permits, they're going to have to still get through you and, you know, whatever we, you know, decide upon in the future.
That's what I just said and got shot down. I said the exact same thing.
shot you down.
Well, grandfathered in, and I said, so we couldn't do that.
Well, nobody, that was not by me.
That's what I just said. Yeah, I know, but it's just frustrating. It's frustrating.
Well, I mean, we got to respect the neighbors to these commercial things. Screening will do that. Cheryl, do you want to throw something?
This is not an indication of my interest in this, but I have a commitment that I've got to go, I should have left 2 minutes ago, so I just don't want to offend anyone or think I'm not interested, but I didn't think it was going to go 2 hours.
So I don't think that what we have before us for the ordinance has anything to do with moratorium. It doesn't. It's pretty much architectural. We're not changing any uses. We're throwing a few CUPs in there, and even taking some out. So as far as the moratorium goes, or the idea of doing a motion on what you have in front of you, as the guys had said at the last meeting, they're committed to continuing doing additional things. But this just changes architect. It doesn't change the use.
Yeah, exactly.
So respectfully, I mean, you kind of stated it incorrectly, that you can still do whatever you want with that moratorium. This is an ordinance change, really nothing to do with the moratorium. It's whether or not you guys want to stand behind your city attorney and do the ordinance as it's written, or if you want to just throw his opinion out, his legal opinion, and what's in the ordinance, and do whatever you want for whatever grandfathering you want. I mean, again, I'm with Paul. Whatever you guys decide, you sit in those seats. But you have a city attorney you're paying, so that's up to you guys.
Opinion out, 'cause it's just.
Thank you, Cheryl. When can everybody come together, and we'll give each one of them 20 minutes to sell themselves, and we can make a decision?
Okay, I have to go.
Not 20 minutes.
I want to do it right now. No. Make, when?
Oh, when? Okay. Yeah, how about next Wednesday?
3 of us aren't in favor of throwing the attorney opinion out, just letting them carry on and putting a workshop together and work on this. I just got to throw that out.
Okay.
But I mean, does anybody else, should that be a motion, or do we want to?
It'd have to be a motion.
I don't know that
You're putting, all I'm saying is you're putting city staff in a really tough position, because then we are administering something that's not permitted.
I do not want to throw out because I read accessory
that's
building like the attorney interpreted it. That's how I interpret it as well. So I don't really think we should change that. And I don't think there should be accessory buildings without a primary building. I mean,
Well, that's residential. We're not talking about that. This is,
Commercial storage is a primary business. You can look by that all day long.
I know, but I mean, it's,
But-
without having a storage,
Okay,
without a primary.
Can
We're
we
not-
agree on Wednesday? Give me a time, I don't care what time it is.
This Wednesday? We gotta have
no.
3 days.
No, not, we have to have more than that.
We need 3 days.
Can we do it Thursday or no?
Yes.
Thursday?
What time?
Thursday, it has to be in the morning for me.
And what is this gonna be, with planning and zoning, and we're gonna try to come up with some?
This is with, I guess I thought we were gonna be with Jarrett and Jeff and get them going back on their deal.
Well, that's not gonna change.
I say, I guess I'm not trying to sound stupid, but I have offered, let's grandfather them in, and I keep getting the ordinance saying we're not abiding by the ordinance. So we're gonna have to change the whole ordinance to grandfather them in, so that is a moot point. It's a waste of time.
Settle down.
Well, sorry. Sorry, but I mean, it's just like we're going in a spin cycle here.
Yeah, no, we gotta change the ordinance, we gotta take the use out of there, if we're gonna do this thing. I mean, and then you can function and operate, and, yeah. And we have to talk with
And
the
the
planning and
architectural,
zoning.
architectural standards, we want to create that.
Well, the standards, we can build on those as time goes on. We don't have to,
I would just like a more formal process as far as individual developers coming in to get approval versus you guys up there right now saying, disregard this and let them do this. Because I don't have documentation. I want it to be formal versus, because that puts city staff in
So
a
if we
very
had a-
vulnerable position.
if we had a meeting on Thursday and we came to an agreement that we're gonna remove or change something, would you have to wait 3 weeks to have that written
As
up?
far as an amendment to the ordinance, yeah, that's a process. As far as if we, I haven't gone through this before, but I mean, what I'm saying is I would like something more formal, whether it's through an application or whatever it might be, something more formal and have those individuals come before you and ask. I would like to see that versus,
On an individual basis, you mean?
well, it can be all in the same meeting, but in an individual case, because all three developers are at different stages. And
Okay.
so I would like to see it be on an individual basis.
I think that's fair, and Paul, out of respect to you, I think that's fair.
Okay, so
Thursday AM, what time?
Is that enough time for Paul?
Well, he needs a consensus or direction, and which he'll get there hopefully, right?
Well, I just don't know, well, off the cuff, I've never gone down this road, so I mean, I have to figure out what exactly that looks like.
Your ordinance says you can permit a commercial building right now. Let's just say you can permit a commercial building right now, and you can lease it to whoever you want, even if it's yourself. It fits your ordinance perfect, you don't have to make any changes.
Dave, I have an application in 2 weeks ago for a spec building. Now, the city cashed a check, but Paul wouldn't issue a
I have
permit.
to go, really sorry.
Because he said you had to talk to planning and zoning and the attorney. Now, planning and zoning and the attorney are not elected officials. I don't know why
Let you know
Paul's
what
running the concept.
If,
All you need to do is tell the
Dave,
planning and zoning
can't talk
how
about
you
staff.
want
Yeah,
the ordinance interpreted. That's all you need to do.
Okay.
Three you vote on.
yeah.
You still got 3 years.
We gotta, we're just, first of all, you gotta come up if you're gonna talk, but, yeah, no.
Because you're letting other people talk, so I will come on.
Okay.
Okay, look,
Sandy left.
look, you either take the recommendation and vote on it, up or down, or you can table it for further discussion. What you're talking about doing here is making individual decisions that don't help Paul. It's not an actual decision. We made a proposal based on your direction to us, so you should either vote it up, vote it down, or table it. Don't make special one-off decisions here.
No, we gotta have a discussion about it. I agree with that. So, I mean, I would support the changes you've made here with a correction to come. I mean, the use, I think it's clear that we're never gonna have 157 cabinet shops coming into this town, so we're gonna have a lot of vacant land sitting around. I think we gotta figure out mechanisms to control it, there's no question about it. But that's my personal feeling, but I gotta talk to all 10 of us, you know, and we gotta decide that.
Well, this right here does not impede.
No, we can approve this, yeah.
So I make a motion that we
Make a
approve
motion
what
to
was
approve.
submitted by Planning and Zoning Commission.
To approve it?
Yeah.
Yes. Because this has no bearing on
Yeah,
where
I'll
the
second
problem
that
is.
motion.
How does this not have any bearing on it?
Well, it's just, we're just approving the standard changes. We still have to have a meeting on Thursday and see if we can come up with another change. But, so does this affect Dean, because he spoke up of his application that you cash the check and come in to do it, it's a spec building? He doesn't know what the use is gonna be, does that affect that at all?
As of right now, moving forward, it would be a conditional use versus over the counter, because it would be commercial storage.
It's gonna mess everything up, Dave. Read the ordinance change they're proposing. It's just gonna make things worse.
Well, there's nothing here other than windows and,
Yes, there is. They're changing the use table.
Why can't we just send it back for the revision? We've all kind of set an idea of where we think it should go.
the use table is there. It's already there. I don't know that they changed
There's
it.
changes in the use table in this ordinance they're asking for.
Okay.
The only,
There's a first and a second.
Yes.
Yeah. Motion on the floor.
Okay, all in favor? You gonna vote Jackson?
No.
Marcia, are you still there?
No. She's on.
Okay, motion fails.
You and I haven't
Well,
voted.
You two voted
Aye.
yes, I voted
Aye.
no.
I
Aye.
made the motion.
Motion passes.
By 2-1.
2-1.
Is that a quorum? Do something?
Yeah, there's 3 people here.
Oh, okay.
What time Thursday?
9 o'clock.
9 AM?
Sounds good.
Are you
No,
guys
no, no,
okay
no.
with 9?
Hold on.
We're not having a meeting Thursday. Staff needs time to figure out what they need to do.
and if we can't publish it till tomorrow, and so we don't have our 3 days for a special meeting. I don't even know if we would or not, but
Can you push Joe enough to where we get an opinion from him quickly enough so we could do it on Monday? I don't care what time.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Joe takes 2 weeks to even respond if he does. I said Joe, our lawyer, takes 2 weeks, if not a month, to even respond, if he does respond.
Then maybe he needs to have discussion.
Well, should we set it for Friday and see if something happens, or are we gonna just put this out for a couple of weeks?
You slide it to like Monday or Tuesday next week.
I'll be out of town Monday or Tuesday next week at Mayo. I'd like to be there.
Okay, we'll postpone it, Dean, so you can be there. Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
So, are we gonna try to set a schedule, a meeting, or just wait?
City staff will have to let us know.
And we gotta wait 3 days after that.
3 days.
You gotta tell him this can't wait.
Aaron, can I have a second to adjourn?
All in favor? Aye.